called NIC CERT. So this is a computer emergency response team of NIC, and our role is pretty similar to CERTN, the Computer Emergency Response Team of India, which is a national level ERT center. So, but our area of work is restricted within NIC domain, and we cater to NIC divisions, state centers, and other users who are part of the NIC ecosystem. So in today's presentation, I would be sharing with you a few case studies of actual security incidents which we handled at NIC CERT. And we'll discuss about how these incidents happened in the first place and how such incidents can be prevented in the future or maybe at your workplace. What are the precautions as an ordinary user you can take at your level? Let me start with the first case study. So the first case study is a phishing attack, and this attack happened pretty recently, maybe a couple of months back. So this is the actual phishing mail which was sent. So you can see the phishing mail specifically targeted a government department which was engaged in COVID-19 mitigation efforts. And they have worded the email in such a way so that it finds some resonance with the particular users who were targeted. So it talks about some instruction from a DG sir, and they're asking the user to download the agenda and application. And there is a download link given. And to make this email even more authentic, if you can see at the right hand side corner of the email, they have included some reference number. And this is, I think, some reference number which they've took from some public circulars or orders which is published by the department on their website. And they've made a similar looking fake reference number, and the date is also mentioned. So the URL, I mean, you can't figure out whether it is a malicious URL because this is something known as a shortened URL. A tinyurl.com is one such site which gives a service where you can put any domain or any link, however long it may be. They'll just shorten the URL into a very small length, and this can be shared over SMS, social media, or whatever. So there are many such sites like bit.ly, and even Google ran one such service, but they shut it down recently. So by looking at this link, it's not possible to figure out what is hiding behind this. And once if you click the link, it will take you to a Google Drive web page. And this is the actual web page where that file was hosted. And you can see the zip file covid.zip being hosted on this particular Google Drive link. So again, you can't find anything suspicious in this zip because file name is matching with what is mentioned in the email. Email says it is related to COVID-19 agent and application, and yes, you have a covid.zip. So let's assume the user clicked on the link and he downloaded the zip file. And since it is a zip, you have to extract the content of the zip to see what is actually present inside it. So once you download the zip and extract the contents, this is what you will get. So you will get two files. The first one is a COVID self-extracting archive. That means this is also a kind of a zip or a RAR file, which is self-extracting. By self-extracting means once you double click it, it automatically extracts the contents. And then you have a simple text file which contains the password for the self-extracting archive. So you have to copy the password from the text file. You have to double click on the self-extracting archive. You put the password, press enter, and then the contents would be extracted. So these are the two contents of the self-extracting archive. So ideally what happens is, in a normal scenario, what we assume is whenever a zip file or an archive file is extracted, we believe that the contents of the zip or archive is extracted. It is not executed. Until unless you double click on the content, it shouldn't be executed. That is what we believe. But in this case, what the hacker has done is, in the self-extracted archive, he has embedded a script. And that script, what it does is, upon the correct password entry, whenever you put the actual password and open the archive, the script gets triggered before the extraction. And the script instructs the self-extracting archive to execute the files which are extracted. So that means the moment you put the password and press enter here, these two files will get executed without your knowledge. And on the desktop or your monitor, you will not find any change. You will just see this window displaying the content of the archive. You will not see any indication that these contents have been executed at all. It will be silently executed at the backend. And what it actually does is, the moment the archive is open and the sample is executed, it drops the contents into the temp folder of Windows. So if you have a Windows username and password, if you go to your C drive users folder and you navigate to app data and other hidden folders, that you'll have a temp folder. So inside that temp folder, it drops one of the files. And then the malware, what it does is, it creates a firewall entry in your Windows firewall. And what it entry does is, it tells the firewall to bypass the checking for this particular file. So literally whatever action this file does is not observed or detected or blocked by the Windows firewall. Windows firewall will just simply turn a blind eye to this process. It is literally whitelisting this process. So it is free to establish any network connection to anywhere in the world. It is free to access any process in Windows, any file in Windows. It can make changes anywhere. Your Windows Firewall, Defender, or whatever antivirus you have, that is not going to restrict this malware. And the second thing what it does is, it creates a startup entry. A startup entry in your Windows. A startup entry is something which contains a list of programs which is automatically executed whenever Windows boots. So when you log into Windows for the first time, even before you type the username and password at the login prompt, your startup items gets loading in the prefetch memory at the backend. So this malware creates a registry entry so that it automatically executes whenever Windows starts. And then I showed you two files, if you see 2019 and 2020. So here the 2019 is the file which is doing all these changes, whereas 2020 is a very simple file which is known in technical terminology as a RAT. RAT is an abbreviation for Remote Administration Toolkit. In layman terms, you can say it is a backdoor. So 2020 is a backdoor. It does only one thing. It establishes a reverse TCP connection to the hacker's server, which again we call it in technical terminology as a C2, command and control server. So that server is a server which is located somewhere in, let's say, assume in Europe. The moment the file 2019 creates the firewall entry, creates the registry entry for automatic startup, all these activities are done, then the file 2020 executes and it establishes a connection with the hacker server. Once the reverse TCP shell is established, the hacker will come to know that he has compromised the system successfully. And now the hacker can start sending further payloads. And payload mean he can send any sort of program into your system and he can do whatever he wants. If he wants, he can just simply wipe out every single file in your system, or you can copy all your files from your system, or you can just sit there and monitor what activities you're doing. So, but in this case, what the hacker is doing, he's dropping a keylogger. And the keylogger, what it does is, it logs every single keystroke you make on your machine. By keystroke, I mean the keys which you type using a keyboard. So these keys strokes are recorded in a simple text file, and then it is automatically shared with the hacker's server at the backend. So maybe every 1 hour it records all keystrokes and then send it back to the hacker's server. So luckily, what we have done in NIC is, in NIC we have a system called a response policy zone, which is known as a RPZ in a short form. So this is something which we have configured at a DNS level. So response policy zone is nothing but a list of blacklisted domains. So we keep handling a lot of security incidents. Whenever we handle a security incident, we investigate it, and at the end of investigation, we come out with a lot of answers like what happened, how it happened, when it happened, what are the indicators involved. Like in this case, we know the rat is establishing a connection to an external C2 server of the hacker. So what is the IP address of that server? And whether it is querying any domain. So these kind of artifacts, which in technical terminology is known as indicators of compromise, IOC in short form. So these indicators of compromise is aggregated at the end of the investigation of each incident. And then we block these indicators of compromise at the perimeter level. So by perimeter means one is the DNS where we do the blocking, then we do the blocking of IP addresses at the gateway level. So once you do a blocking of IP at the gateway, no communication can come from that IP to our network. And even within our network, if some machines are compromised, they will not be able to connect to those hackers' IP. But whenever a communication is hitting that block rule, we'll come to know which internal IP is trying to communicate, and then we'll come to know, yes, this machine could have been compromised. That is why it is trying to communicate with a blacklisted IP or a domain. So luckily, if the user is connected to an IC network and is using an IC's DNS, then even if the malware has successfully executed, it will not be able to connect to the C2 server because we have already blocked the parent domain. The parent domain is something xyz.net. So we have blocked the parent domain in the RPZ and the connection would have been disconnected. But unfortunately, due to COVID, pandemic, lockdown, and other restrictions, many people started working from home. So where they're connected to their broadband or a mobile GPRS data, whatever they had at their disposal. So when you connect from your home, you don't have the luxury of the security setup which is provided in the government network. So some people who have downloaded this particular file and they executed their machines connected with the C2 server. And once you're connected, then your machine is completely compromised and it is under the control of hacker. And the beautiful part is you will not have any indication that your machine is misbehaving. The hacker will be coming and going at his own leisure time. He can send commands at any point of time, or he can just program a script and instruct your machine to do certain activities at a certain period of time. All will be running at the background. So what can you do to prevent this? There are two things to this. So the first thing is, it is very essential to have your operating system updated with the latest updates and patches. Because it doesn't matter what malware or virus you download from the internet or somebody puts into your machine, that virus or malware, in order to execute and compromise a machine, they need to exploit a particular vulnerability. A vulnerability is a weakness in your system, and that weakness can exist at the operating system level. It can exist in your web browsers like Firefox, Chrome, Opera, whatever. It can exist in a software. The software could be your MS Office or your Adobe PDF reader, or even your printer software, anything. So it is always essential to have your operating system and the softwares which you're running on your machines to be updated with the latest updates and patches. That is the first thing. And the second is always do have an antivirus which is updated with the latest signatures. And the third thing is don't log into your system using the administrative privileges. This is very, very important because in this particular case, when we're talking about these two files, 2019 and 2020, these two malicious files, if they want to execute successfully and compromise the system, they need an administrative privilege. Let's assume you have logged in as an administrative user into your machine and you opened this archive, then you will be compromised. But let's say you have used a non-admin account, that is a standard user account without any administrative privilege. Then the moment you try to open the archive and then when this file try to execute at the back end, it will not execute successfully because it doesn't have an administrative privilege and it will show you a prompt. Windows will show you a prompt saying that this particular file 2019 is trying to execute. If you want it to execute, please provide the administrative credentials. You have to put the administrative username and password and then it will execute. So at least you will get an indication that some file is trying to execute with the admin credentials. So if you have done these three things, that is have the OS updated and all the software is updated, have the latest antivirus with the latest updates, and logged in using a non-admin user account, then you would have been safe from these kind of malwares and viruses to a certain extent. That doesn't mean you're completely saved from all known viruses or malware, but majority of viruses and malware do require admin privileges to execute. So always ensure that you do log in into your machine with a standard user account for the day-to-day activities. Only when you want to do some config changes, maybe you want to install a new software or a driver or any other configuration related changes, at that point of time you can use the administrative account. So other than that, it is always recommended not to use it for the day-to-day jobs like browsing the internet or using MS Office, PowerPoint, whatever it is. So that is a safe uh, method of staying away from the malware to a certain extent. So this is another incident, a similar incident. And this also had a similar kind of backdoor hosted on this link. But here, if you notice closely the URL of the link, the domain especially, the domain, if a layman reads the domain, it says drive-nic.online. So a normal person may think this could be a NIC drive on the lines of a Google Drive where they host file sharing websites, and they could have clicked on the website. But whereas this has nothing to do with NIC, and this is not even a .in domain. The domain is .online. So before clicking on any link which you receive through email or SMS or any messaging apps or social media, always look for the domain which is on the extreme right hand side after the dot and verify whether it is a known domain. If you have never heard of the domain, it is a completely new one, then please avoid clicking on the link. This is another phishing attack, but in this case, the URL is hidden behind the button. Here you can see a button which says continue backup. And this mail is targeted to a specific user. So the hacker has done some preliminary research about the user. So he has drafted a mail in such a manner so it resonates with the user. Like it talks about a backup server for SQL, and he has given a button. He's asking the user just click on this button to authenticate your server. But how to identify the link which is hiding behind this button? Simple way is just hover, that is move your mouse on top of the button without clicking it. If you move the mouse on top of the button, you can see at the bottom of the web page the actual URL. The moment you see this URL, this is something .com.br, you will come to know this has nothing to do with government or Haryana or NIC home server, and you can get an indication this is some sort of phishing mail. So always be careful. Some mails may have a button, some mails will be having a picture. The full mail will be a JPG or some other picture, and behind that picture a single link might be hiding. So always be careful before clicking the picture or link anything in mails. Just move your mouse on top of that and see what link is there. But in spite of moving the mouse on top of the page or the image, you're not getting the links, then you can right click and see view source. So at least there you can find out which link is hiding behind that. So until unless you are damn sure about what is the link, and if you don't trust the link, or if you have never heard about the link in the first place, then it is always better to not click on such links. So far we saw phishing attacks which came through email medium. So this phishing attack, this is something which came through SMS. So you can see the user received a SMS which says that Amazon package with Apple iPhone will be delivered by Feb 15, and it gives you a shortened URL. This is similar to the first phishing case study where we saw tinyurl.com being leveraged for such attacks. Here they leveraged a similar service like tinyurl. This is a bit.ly. This is also URL shortener. So in this case, the user didn't click on the link. When he first received this SMS, he just ignored it. So, but the hacker is very persistent. So he knows that the user hasn't clicked the link because each URL he has crafted very uniquely for each recipient. So I may be getting a different URL. If you are receiving the similar kind of message, the URL will be very unique to each user. So the hacker is programmed in such a way that if the user has not clicked until a certain duration, let's say for 5 or 6 hours, then again the same message would be sent. But in this case, the wording would be very different. So here he has mentioned, you can see the second message. Second message says that arriving today, your Apple iPhone is going to be at your doorstep before 8 p.m. today. So when any normal individual sees the second message, the first thing that comes to your mind is some sort of suspicious. Well, you know that you have not ordered iPhone on your Amazon app, but you may get a suspicion that maybe one of your family member could have done, or maybe your friends or relatives might have ordered to give an iPhone to you as a gift. Or another possibility, somebody hacked into your Amazon account and they ordered iPhone through your account. Whatever the possibility, you want to at least check your Amazon account and verify whether you have actually ordered an iPhone. In case some order has been placed by mistake, you will think, okay, I want to cancel the order at the bare minimum because I don't want to end up paying 1 lakh plus for a random iPhone which I don't need. So normally, ideally, a user would open their Amazon app, but most of us are too lazy to navigate from SMS, go to a different screen and select an Amazon app. So many people would be tempted to directly click on the link given below in the SMS. And we believe that this link would lead us to the actual Amazon apps order page where we can directly cancel the order. And once you click the link, what happens is it will take you to a Amazon login page. And that page would be exactly same as the original Amazon website's login page. You can't spot any difference unless you pay the So, am I audible now? Okay, thanks. I think I just
Now
dropped
you
out.
are audible. In between, we lost your voice.
Yeah, I dropped out, I think. I just didn't realize. Apologize for the inconvenience. So going back to this incident. So once you click on this phishing link, this will take you to an actual Amazon website. I mean, it's not an original Amazon. It'll take you to a phishing page which looks very similar to the Amazon web page. So until unless you pay close attention to the URL on the address bar, you will not find any difference, because the URL on the address bar is not Amazon. It is something like amazonorder.com. So there it will ask you for your username and password. You put your Amazon username and password, and it doesn't matter what username password you put. You can even put any random characters like username is 123, password 123, and press enter. Still, you will proceed to the next page. In the next page, you will get two options. The website will tell you whether do you want to cancel the order or you want to pay for the order. If you want to cancel the order, there is a button. You can press cancel order button, or if you want to pay for the order, there is a pay button. And it doesn't matter whichever button you press, you will be directed to the next page where they will ask you your card details, credit card details. You have to put your credit card number, the expiry date, year, CVV number, your name, and other stuff, and then you press enter. And once you press enter, you will get a very good looking reference number saying that this is your reference number for the order cancellation or payment, whatever it is. So, and then you're done. So now you think, okay, I'm successfully either placed the order or cancel the order. So what the hacker has done here is, in the first time when you visited the website, he has asked for your Amazon username and password. At that point of time, he is harvesting your username and password. He will just saves whatever you entered there. So until unless you have a two-factor enabled in your Amazon account, then your password is gone. I mean, your account is compromised. And many of us have a habit of using the same password across multiple websites. So say, for example, your Amazon username is abc@gmail.com. It is very likely you might have used the same email ID and same password for registering in flipkart.com. And even it could be the same username and password for your Gmail account or Yahoo account, whatever. There are a number of online websites, and many people, just for the sheer sake of convenience, use the same ID and password across multiple sites. So the hacker, what he does is he just harvests your passwords and username, he adds to a database, and then they use such kind of credentials in an attack called as password spraying attack, where they do a script-based attack across multiple websites. Let's assume the hacker has a database consisting of 1 million usernames and passwords. All these 1 million username and password would be iterated across all popular websites. It can be a social networking website, it can be a banking website, it can be a email service provider, or it can be an e-commerce website. So they have a collection of some 100 or 200 popular websites, and they run this credentials, the 1 million credentials, against all these websites. And in order to avoid any suspicion, they use some proxies. A good example would be a Tor proxy. A Tor proxy is something where all your traffic would be routed through the Tor network. There is an anonymous network. So every time your request lands at, let's say, amazon.com or a flipkart.com, it will come with a different IP, so that these people don't get any alarms saying, or let's assume if I'm attempting the login of 1 million IDs from a single IP, obviously it will raise red flags on the security monitoring dashboard, and immediately the IP would get blocked. So in order to avoid such blocking, they use these kind of proxies where multiple IP is used for each request. And wherever they were able to successfully attempt to log in, then that credential would be validated and stored separately. And then these credentials gets traded in dark web markets, or they may be used for launching further phishing attacks. So those sort of things happen. So next thing we come to the credit card, the page where you enter your credit card details. So irrespective of whether you cancel the order or you pay for the order, you have to provide your credit card details in this phishing website. So credit card details or a debit card details, ideally we have a mentality to think that I have a OTP enabled in my card. So even if somebody takes my card details, they can't do anything. So we assume we are safe. But one thing you have to in websites, in e-commerce or any other financial transactions you do on foreign websites, let's say instead of Amazon.in, or you go to Amazon.com, or even you go to eBay.com or any other foreign-based websites, most of the websites, they don't ask for a OTP. Even though you are using an India-based credit card or a debit card, and most of the foreign websites, OTP is not required because that is purely handled by payment gateway processors like Visa or MasterCard. So without OTP, if the user is able to enter the correct details of the card number, CVV number, and expiry date, then the transaction would go through. So, but at the same time, hacker is not so dumb to withdraw money from your account using his own whatever accounts in social network or e-commerce website. So what he does is he will compile all these stolen card details, and that will be traded in the black market, again the dark web and many other forums. So most of the time hackers, they don't use it themselves. Otherwise they just simply use it on a Bitcoin exchange platform. So the Bitcoin exchange platform is where you use your card, credit card or debit, whatever card you have, to purchase Bitcoins. So you give real currency to get a virtual currency like Bitcoin. And once it is converted into Bitcoins, then it is virtually untraceable. Then the hacker is free to use those Bitcoins anywhere as per his whims and fancies. So the lesson from this particular incident is, again, it is same as the first one. Shortened URLs, always be very, very careful. Just don't go by what is written above the shortened URL. Most of the time it could be very deceiving. It may be very, very appealing to you, because hackers tend to use such appealing words to attract your attention and force you to click on the link. So there is no way you can directly verify a shortened URL by just looking at it. So only way to verify is you directly open the URL, or you use a service which is called as URL expander. So what we have done in NIC is we have set up a website portal, urlcheck.nic.in. So here you can come, you can log in to this portal using your NIC email credentials. And then you can paste whatever shortened URL you have with you. It will expand the URL and it will give you the actual URL which is behind that. So that is one service. The second is you can see a URL scan feature in this portal. So here what we do is, any domain or URL, if you feel that this domain or URL looks suspicious, or you have never seen such a domain before, this is the first time you are noticing something like this. So you can come and do a URL scan on that. By chance, if we already have any prior intelligence about that URL or domain, you will get a response in this portal. It will show you this URL is blacklisted, and why it is blacklisted, whether it is a malware or a phishing or a ransomware related domain or URL, you will get that information. And we keep on enriching this database on a daily basis. But at the same time, if this portal doesn't have any intelligence, and if we say we don't know anything about this URL, that doesn't mean the URL is clean. So we only show you what intelligence we have regarding the particular URL or domain. So this portal is available within the NIC network, but let's assume you are not connected to NIC network. You are sitting on your own corporate network, or you are sitting at your home using a broadband. Then you can just Google up URL expander. You will get a lot of sites which are offering the service. So you can go to any site and copy paste this shortened URL, and they will expand the shortened URL and give it to you. So always make it a habit of expanding the shortened URL and check what lies behind this. If only you trust the URL completely, then proceed ahead by clicking on it. Otherwise, always avoid clicking on shortened URLs. So next is this is something related to Arogya Setu app, the COVID pandemic contact tracing app launched by the Indian government. So during the months of April and May of 2020, Arogya Setu was almost reaching its peak utilization. There were millions of users being added on a daily basis. So since hackers around the world, they came to know that Arogya Setu is gaining a lot of user base, they thought it could be a very ideal target to compromise certain individuals. So, and this attack was targeted at very selective people. They didn't target on a mass scale of by citizens. They just targeted specific government people. So what the hacker have done is they downloaded the legitimate APK of Arogya Setu from some third-party app stores. So you have many things apart from Google Play Store. There are many third-party app stores like APK, Sure, XYZ. A lot of app stores are there. So they have an exact copy of the Google Play Store with them, and you can just download the APK on your PC, laptop, wherever you want. So once you download the APK, almost all Android APK you can decompile them to a certain extent. So until as you have used a lot of code obfuscation and other techniques, almost all Android APKs can be decompiled and certain parts of code can be seen. But it's not possible to understand all the codes because many people nowadays they use deep obfuscation techniques, and we had used deep obfuscation in Arogya Setu also. But the key here is once the app is decompiled, the hacker has not made much changes to the app. He has done just two changes. One is he has added a login, a Facebook login button, and then he added something called a meterpreter. So meterpreter is a command line interface of a popular framework called Metasploit. Metasploit is a tool which is very popular among security auditors and also popular with hackers. So what this tool does is it actually aids in penetration testing. So whenever a security auditor is doing an audit of your network, ideally they start with something called a VA, vulnerability assessment. So in this portion, they will just scan your network and your infrastructure or application, and just purely based on scanning, they will enumerate what are the vulnerabilities that exist on your network. Once the list of vulnerabilities are identified, the next step is try and see whether I can exploit those vulnerabilities. By exploitation, I mean that use those vulnerability and penetrate, intrude into your network or a system. So this is where Metasploit comes into picture. It's not mandatory to use Metasploit for all exploitation, but it is a very good tool which offers you a one-stop solution kind of thing. So it is just a framework. It allows you to integrate any exploit on top of it and run those exploits within a matter of few minutes. And there is a website called exploitedDB.com, if you have heard of it. So that is an open website. It is available in the public domain. If you go to the website, you can find live exploit code for almost most of the known vulnerabilities. Any Windows vulnerability you take, you will find exploit code over there. Any Oracle vulnerability, any Apache vulnerability, most of the all known vulnerabilities, some exploit code you will find there. All you have to do is just download that exploit code into your machine and launch that code through Metasploit against the computer or a network which you want to hack. That's it. It's very simple. No advanced knowledge is required. All you have to is download exploit code which is already written by someone and fire it against your target. So the framework is a full-fledged suite which offers you a lot of flexibilities, options, and once the exploit is successfully done on a machine, once the machine is compromised, then you can do lateral traversal. By lateral traversal means moving between systems within the same network and then start compromising each and every systems. So the possibility is endless. So Metasploit framework gives you all those facilities. But whereas the Meterpreter is a very lightweight, it doesn't occupy much space. It occupies a few KBs, and you can just launch it anywhere and do some basic exploits. So one of the basic exploits to do is a reverse TCP shell. So the hacker bundled the Meterpreter into this fake Aarogya Setu app, and he has included a fake Facebook login button. And he started sharing the download link for this fake app through messaging platforms and social media. So once as a user, you receive this SMS or a message on your messaging platform, which says you to download Aarogya Setu latest version from the following link. The moment you click on the link, this app will be downloaded from some file sharing website. Again, here, the key thing to notice here also they used something like bit.ly, a shortened URL. So if you have seen a pattern emerging, like from the first incident which I touched upon, the phishing incident where we had a backdoor, and next is a SMS, and now we have a mobile platform as an attack vector. In all these attack vectors, the common thing is use of shortened URLs. Hackers are very heavily exploiting shortened URLs because that is something which gives you the flexibility to hide behind something. It doesn't raise any alarms when a normal user sees it, or even the URL when it goes through any firewall, IPS, or any other proxy or security appliance. Shortened URL doesn't raise much alarms. So they heavily exploit this. So you have to be very, very careful while clicking shortened URLs. So this fake app was also shared through such shortened URL. Once you download the app on your mobile phone, I mean, this was specifically targeted on Android platform, so it was APK. Since this app was not officially hosted on Google Play Store, by default, your Android mobile will not allow you to install the app. It will prompt a security warning. It will say the app is not a signed app. It is not an official Google app. It is came from a third-party source. If you trust the app and if you want to execute it or install it on your mobile phone, you have to enable a certain setting. You have to go to your settings menu, and then there is an option where you can just tick mark and allow installation of apps from any third party or untrusted sources. By default, this option is disabled in Android for security reasons, because Google allows installation of apps only through official Google Play Store. So any other location apart from the official Play Store that is not trusted within the Google ecosystem. But by chance, if you go there and you bypass the basic security check, then you will be able to install this app. And once you install this app, and this is just a virus total snapshot of how many antiviruses recognize the file as a Trojan or a malware. These are the permissions required by the fake app. It literally requests every single permission on your phone. It knows, it can read your SMS, it can send SMS, it can listen to your calls, it can block your calls, it can block your SMS. It even has a keylogger which records every keystroke you make on your mobile phone. And on top of that, it establishes a reverse TCP shell connection with the hacker's command and control server. So like in the first case study, we were talking about a file which was establishing a request TCP connection from your desktop or laptop to the hacker server. Same scenario happens here, but the only difference is here your mobile is compromised and the full control of your mobile is now with the hacker. And again, here you won't get any indication on your mobile screen. You will see everything working normal, beautiful. There is no change on the top, but at the background, hacker will be leveraging all whatever data you have, it will be copied by him. And if he wants, he can even hide incoming calls on your phone. Your friend may be calling you, but hacker can hide that call. He can redirect the call to his own mobile phone. And same goes for SMS. Your banking OTP SMS, he can just hide the SMS from your mobile phone and he can redirect the SMS to his own mobile or CNC server. And he can even switch on your camera at any point of time. He can record wherever you're going. So every single possibility on a mobile phone, can be done by the hacker. So to stay safe from such kind of things from the mobile perspective, you can do two things. One is always download apps only from the official app store, be it a Google or Apple. And second is never click on these shortened URLs. If somebody says the shortened URL is where you download app, please verify the URL using a URL expander service and then go, or the best option is directly go to the Play Store or App Store and search the name of the app and then download from there. Don't click on these links. The next form of attack, this is a very interesting. So here you can see a lot of famous websites, ebay.com, apple.com, Adobe, Cisco. If you pay a close attention in some of the websites name, you can find a slight anomaly. Somewhere the E and F looks a bit different. Even though you can figure out it is an F, but it's not a normal English F. And let's say in case of Twitter, you can see the R is inverted like a mirror reflection and W looks a bit strange. So you can figure out, yes, something is wrong with Twitter. In case of Microsoft, F is something abnormal. Google, you can see the E. There is a comma beneath the E. So these things you can figure out, yes, something is not quite normal. But whereas you see the first domain, adobe.com, apple.com, you can't find anything suspicious. It looks exactly similar to the original adobe.com and apple.com, and there is no way on earth you will find any difference between this and the original one. Even if you do a side-by-side comparison between the original Adobe and this Adobe, you can't spot a difference using a naked eye. But what is happening here is almost all domains mentioned in this web page, all are fake phishing domains. The reason I'll tell you, there is a body called ICANN, Internet Council for Assigned Names and Numbers. That body is responsible for the governance of internet as we know today. So they control all the root DNS. They decide which domain can exist. So let's say now we have domains like .online, which we saw in the second use case. There is a domain called triple O. There is a domain called triple X. So a lot of such domains, ICANN approves. Somebody goes to ICANN, they make an application, they say, I want to have a domain .hurry. If ICANN gives me approval, then only I can register a domain called .hurry. So they literally control the internet. So since the time when internet came into existence, almost all domain names were in English. Every single website you see, all were in English. But in the later half of the 20th century, some countries like Russia, China, and some European countries where they give more preference to their local language, they approached ICANN. Even the Arab countries also approached ICANN. They said, we want domain names in our own local language. So Russians want a domain name in Russian language. Chinese want domain names in Mandarin or Cantonese. Arab countries wanted in their own Arabic lingo. French wanted domains in French language. So since a lot of such representation came up, then I can constituted a task force, a committee to analyze these requirements. And after much deliberations and standardization, they came out with certain guidelines where they approved something called internationalized domain names, IDN to be for short. So even India has domains in our own local language. I don't know if you have heard of, we have a domain called dot Bharat. Dot Bharat is an alternative for dot in. So you can type in Hindi dot Bharat. And similarly for gov.in, we have Sarkar dot Bharat. And some states like Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, they have also have some websites running on their local language. But as of now, the number of such websites are very few. The adoption is still needs to pick up. And apart from adoption at the government or private level, the awareness at the user level is also very less. Because in order to type a domain name in the local language, let's say I want to type a domain name in Tamil or Telugu, I need to have that language back installed on my machine. My keyboard has to support that language. Or I can use Unicode to type it, but again, that requires a certain level of technical expertise. So what hackers did is they saw a very lucrative opportunity in this because if you see the European languages, most of the European languages, including English, they all had their origin from a language called Latin. Latin is almost a mother of all European languages, be it French, German, Greek, Italian, English. They all came from Latin. So since they all had a common origin, the characters, the alphabets used in these languages are almost similar. They may even sound similar and they may even look similar. So the apple.com here you see in this page is not the English apple.com. This is a different language. Same goes for Facebook. I'll show you the next slide. This is the actual fake Facebook website which hacker has set up using ID and name. So here hacker has used Cyrillic language, Cyrillic and Greek. So Greek and Cyrillic also has letters and alphabets which almost look similar to the English alphabets. And he has copied the content of the actual Facebook login page. So, and there is no way you can identify this is a fake Facebook page until unless you pay a very close attention on the URL and see there are slight differences in the way F, V, and O is mentioned. So this may not raise much red flags. And similarly to the Twitter is another case. And this is the email.gov.in, a fake website. Here also you can't spot much differences. And this is a Punicode representation of the fake email.gov.in. So how to spot such websites? So again, here the thumb rule is don't click directly on the link which you receive on email because such websites, they don't get traffic automatically from user. You're not going to type a Cyrillic website or a Greek website and reach over there. So hackers, they use email, social media, and messaging platforms to share such links. So when you get such links, always be very careful. And any website which has a login, let's say you are using a banking website, your email, be it a Gmail or a government email account, or your social media account or your e-commerce website account, always type the name of the website on the address bar manually. Don't bookmark those websites on the browser. Don't click on any link. Just manually type the website name and then check for the HTTPS symbol. Once you type the website, check the HTTPS green padlock if you're seeing a green padlock. And then you can type your username and password. And wherever possible, If two-factor is available, just use two-factor, enable it mandatorily. Most of the major websites, including banking, social media, they all offer two-factor authentication. Just enable it and type the URL manually on the address bar. Don't go through any links. So I think and Mr. Naresh, how much time do we have yet?
Sir, we are almost done, sir.
Okay, then I'll do one thing. So I'll just share the presentation to Mr. Naresh. You can just go through it. I'll just stress upon just two more slides. It goes back to the first incident which I was talking about, the phishing incident where you had a rat. So if you remember, I was telling that if you don't use an administrative account while opening the archive, the damage would be very less. So this is an actual fact. You can see that 83% of all critical vulnerabilities in Microsoft product during the last 5 years cannot be exploited if you use a non-admin user. So it doesn't matter who the hacker is, what exploit is using, but 83% of all critical vulnerabilities, and this is an actual stat. So this is very critical for your day-to-day activities. Please use a non-admin account. So it will save you from a lot of trouble. And of course, apart from this, disable the PowerShell by default on your machine. So the PowerShell is a tool which comes with Windows. It gives you a direct kernel access. You can automate a lot of administrative tasks, but again, that has to be done by the administrators. Most of us will not be administering a server on a day-to-day basis on your machine. So if it is not being used, just go to the control panel, go to the add or remove feature, and uncheck the tick mark against PowerShell. So once you do that, PowerShell would be disabled on your machine. Because if you keep PowerShell on, it can be easily leveraged by the hacker. And we have seen many incidents where hackers have specifically developed or deployed scripts which use the inbuilt PowerShell command line to exploit and cause a lot of damage on the systems. So keep PowerShell disabled and keep remote desktop also disabled. If at all, if some troubleshooting exercise needs to be done, at that point of time, you can enable remote desktop, but the rest of the time, please keep these two things disabled. And then I have a last slide. And this slide gives you a very simple overview of the common 12 steps which you can follow at your level to maintain a basic cybersecurity hygiene. So this is for a normal end user. So just have it a go through. So the whole summary of this presentation you can find in this slide. And apart from this, the other point which I'm again stressing is don't use an admin account for a day-to-day basis and switch off your machine before you leave office. Don't keep it switched on because that can also cause a lot of damage. So I think that's it from my side. If there are any questions, we can I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, we can